All right. What's happening, everybody? It's your boy JT. We're here in the OFB network, here in the SAC, where the temperature is always regulated. It's Valentine's Day. Today is Valentine's Day. Lovely day of chocolates and roses and doves and sexual promiscuity and newfound BDSM kinks. I don't know. Just it's a day of things like that. So it's a day where you buy your mom and the girl you want to bone a card, and you tell them how much you love them, which I find rather weird, but okay. And also in the other direction, your mom buys you a card, bones your dad. Maybe that's how you got here. Were you born in like December? That's probably exactly what happened. You might want to pay attention. So anyway, today we're going to tell a little story of Valentine's Day. We're going to tell a couple of stories of where Valentine's Day supposedly came from, and then we're going to talk about why it probably didn't a little bit. So anyhow, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. You know the drill. Let's go. I bet you. I think really, if we try really hard, we can get to 10 subscribers. 10. That's right. That's what we're going for. So let's get into it. So the first one is the story of the pagan holiday. Well, let me see. I have to consult my notes because I'm not going to say it right. Lupercalia. Okay, it was a holiday in celebration of Lupercus. Now, some people say this is a holiday where it was a fertility holiday for humans, but actually it started as a fertility holiday for livestock, as Lupercus was a god of shepherds, amongst other things. He was definitely the god of fertility, though. So this holiday, if you celebrate it and you believe this origin story, was for animals. So you're an animal. So make sure you make love like an animal, okay? In honor of Valentine's Day. So the god of Lupercus is an interesting fellow. He is, some say, associated to Pan, who's associated to Baal, who's associated to Nimrod. So if you celebrate this holiday, apparently you're also an idiot, because we all know what Nimrod means, right? A moron, right? The guy who built the Tower of Babel, or wanted to. So in this pagan holiday, what they did was they had orgies and, brought their lovers together and passed them around and did all kinds of things that we can't mention on YouTube. But they also sacrificed dogs and sheep and goats, I should say, because dogs and goats apparently like to bone. So because of their fornication fortitude, they were chosen as animals of this holiday. So they sacrificed and they used their skins, and they would run around in the crowd, and any woman that got close to them, they would whip with these skins, and supposedly it made them more fertile. So over time, women would line up to be whipped with the freshly skinned goat and dog hide. So if you think the women you have to deal with today are a problem, think about that for a second, because I don't know anybody that's doing that. And I prefer someone with maybe a little bit of attitude as opposed to someone who's lining up to get whipped by a dog to get more pregnant. Talk about having to keep a you-know-what baby. Anyway, so supposedly, the Roman Catholic Church came around and they wanted to, as they did with many other things like Christmas, they wanted to incorporate this pagan holiday into Christianity to make it easier for these newly found Christian pagans to celebrate, because a lot of them apparently didn't like giving up their old rituals, which makes sense because when you think about what Christians do on their holidays, they fast and they pray, whereas all these pagans, they drink and have sex and hang out with friends. So if you're trying to convince somebody to come to your religion and you look in one door and you see a bunch of people on their knees, hungry as hell, praying to God, and you look in the other door and you see a bunch of naked people having sex and drinking alcohol, I mean, which door are you going to go into? I don't know about you, but I might choose door number 2. So the Christians very wisely incorporated some of that stuff, and then as they would, as is still the tradition with our government and other things, they slowly phase out the fun parts, and then you're left with just the soul-crushing residuals. So anyway, so that's story number 1, right? Let me see here. All right, a little fun fact in between stories here. Supposedly, or apparently, on average, in the U.S. alone, 18.2 18 D, and that for you, those of you who don't speak retard, $18.2 billion every Valentine's Day is spent, with a reported $21.5 billion spent in 2020. So that's a lot of money. That's a whole lot of money. Now, story number 2 is probably the little bit more widely known, and it has to do with Saint Valentine, Valentinus, a priest of the Catholic order, who, according to some stories, there's 2 different versions of this story. The first one is the Roman Emperor Claudius II decided that he wanted more single men in the army because that's who fought harder. Well, because married men would be thinking about their wives or something. And I think it was more like single men probably fought to win because they wanted to get home. Married men thought about their wives and kind of half fought so they could stay out there longer because they didn't want to go home and get bitched at. Just kidding. Anyway, so he created a law that said young men could not get married. And this just broke the hearts of all these young Roman men. So priest Valentine, who wore Cupid's ring, by the way, or wore a ring of Cupid, however you'd say that, he wore a ring that had Cupid on it. He started marrying these couples kind of in secret. And eventually, obviously, he got caught. And they caught him because they recognized his ring with Cupid on it. And he was taken, in one story, he was taken to jail. And the jailer had a daughter. And the jailer was sad because his daughter was blind. So the priest, so he found out that he knew this guy was a priest, so he asked him to pray over her, and he did. And he put his hands on her, and her blindness was cured. So Saint Valentine, he wasn't a saint yet, the priest Valentinus, became friends with this girl, talked to her, but then the day before his beheading, on the 13th of February, he wrote her a note, and he signed the note, "Your Valentine," which was supposedly the first Valentine's note, card, whatever you want to call it. Now, the other version of that story is he was put in, in quote unquote jail, but I guess they got sold as, I don't know what happened. I guess they sell him as slaves sometimes. But anyway, so one of the people who kept him, the guy who kept him, had a blind daughter and or son. And same thing happened. He was talking about Christianity and trying to convince him of it, and he cured his blindness of his child, so they converted to Christianity. And in this version of the story, they killed the entire family when the emperor found out, and then beheaded the priest. So either way, the priest gets beheaded. In some stories, he's tortured. Also, another facet of this story that kind of changes is it's not always the note to the daughter. Sometimes it's said as notes from married couples that would bring to Valentinus in his jail cell, and they said how much they loved being in love more than they loved war. So they said love was more fun than war. So, newsflash: Romans, apparently young Romans, thought having sex was more fun than war. It's a pretty bold stance they were taking. So those are the 2 most widely accepted stories of Valentine's Day. Obviously, I should finish that one. So Valentinus was then later, obviously very much later, ordained as the god of love. Basically, not really. No, I'm sorry, that would be pagan. He was just the saint of love. What's the difference? I don't know. If he's curing people's blindness, I mean, might as well be. But anyway, so also the along with this, wait. So another couple of facts that you may be interested in. Valentine's Day, the rose was supposedly come from Venus, who is the goddess of love and, more importantly, prostitution. She was the mother of Cupid, as she and Mercury were apparently married, or whatever gods do, and they had a son named Cupid who flew around with a bow and arrow, and he could pierce the hearts of both gods and men and make them fall in love. And according to some people, he's not just a little beautiful baby with a bow and arrow, but he's a full-grown man with his thing hanging out, swinging around while he's shooting people with a bow and arrow. So it's not so cute. It's more perverted, more kind of like, probably deserves some jail time. That's pretty much it. Cupid was, the god of love, I guess. I'd rather picture him as a little fat baby, shooting people with an arrow. It's never made a whole lot of sense to me. Like, he just randomly shoots people? Like, that's pretty irresponsible. Like, I would suck to believe in that. Okay, so apparently none of what I just said was true. There's almost no evidence, no historical record of any of that stuff being linked to Valentine's Day or anything of the sort. What we do know is that around the 5th century, Pope Gelasius, or as some people would say, Gelasius, which I hope that's true. Gelasius, that would be much better. Maybe that's where maybe he was jealous of the orgies. That's where we got the word jealousy from. Don't look up the etymology of that word, because I'm sure that what I'm saying is right. No need to look it up. So anyway, he made it a holiday, St. Valentine's Day. Now, we're not really sure what St. Valentine, what Valentinus he picked. It could be one from the previous stories, or some dude that died in Africa as well, but we don't know anything about him. But one thing we do know is the romance aspect was not added until about 1,000 years later or so. The first mention of romance in Valentine's Day was Geoffrey Chaucer. All right, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote a poem about birds mating, because he noticed that birds were mating around the same time of year, around early February. So he wrote the following poem. So that poem reads as such: For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl comes there his mate to take, of every species that men know, I say, and then so huge a crowd did they make, that earth and sea and tree and every lake was so full that there was scarcely space for me to stand, so full was all the place. I think that means there were so many birds doing it that there wasn't room to stand. Sounds like something like that on St. Valentine's Day. Sure, why not? So that was the first mention of the romance part, and from this, people started passing little notes. This is when they first started passing little valentines, apparently, from this poem, Geoffrey Chaucer. So congrats, Mr. Chaucer. You'll live in infamy forever. The next mention that we have of romance in Valentine's Day was in Hamlet, and that was around also in the 17th century, I think it was, and that was from Ophelia, who sang the following song. Tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning bedtime, and I am made at your window to be your Valentine. Then up he rose and donned his clothes and duped the chamber door. Let in the maid that out a maid never departed more. So if you want a translation of that, she was a maid when he went in, but wasn't a maid when he went out. That means no longer a virgin. So more kinky time for people sneaking in your window, because, Valentine's Day. So that was the next mention of it, was that. So in closing, we don't actually know a whole lot about Valentine's Day or where it came from. We do know this for sure, though, that part of what made it popular, or what made it explode, was post-industrial revolution. Because, I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. Pre-industrial revolution, people were writing handwritten notes and cards, time-consuming stuff. But post-industrial revolution, when things could be manufactured on a grander scale and people could buy their cards pre-made, it kind of exploded. This is where Hallmark ended up coming from and things like that. England, though, apparently has stopped, they don't do Valentine's Day like the U.S. does, and this is supposedly came from the late 18th century, because trolling was the thing back then too, and people started sending Valentines to their enemies with disgusting things on them and words of hate. So the trolls have always been here. They didn't just arrive when the internet came. So when you take out your loving girlfriend, wife, son, daughter, whatever you do for Valentine's Day, whether you're telling your mom how much you love her or you're telling your wife, just remember that it probably came from somewhere awful or nowhere at all. So happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I love you because I am your internet father. Okay? If you're one of my kids, go to bed.